Welcome back, everyone. Last week, we examined the key characteristics of the Gothic through reading Edgar Allan Poe's stories. For the next 3 weeks, we're going to be examining how two different authors riff on the Gothic, utilizing it for different purposes other than to just engender fear. And we're going to be starting this week with Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey. I want to give you a little bit of background information on Jane Austen. First of all, Jane Austen was a Regency-era novelist. She was born in 1775, and she died in 1817. And she was a contemporary of Frances Burney, who, if you'll recall, you read Frances Burney's novel Evelina. And as you're reading Northanger Abbey, it may remind you in some ways of Evelina. And that's because Austen was a huge fan of Frances Burney's writing. And she drew on this writing as inspiration for her own work. But Jane Austen's career and fame is really quite different than that of Frances Burney. In her own day, Frances Burney was incredibly famous. She was essentially had the same level of fame as J.K. Rowling. But by the end of her life, and then after her death, her work really passed into obscurity. Very few people read Burney's work until I would say about the 1980s, at which point feminist scholars began to recuperate her work and teach it in college classrooms. And since then, it's grown in terms of popularity, that college students are pretty well aware of Burney if they take literature classes. By contrast, Jane Austen was a well-received novelist and a popular novelist in her own time period, though she was not as famous as Frances Burney. But her work has always been really popular ever since her death. And in fact, over the last 200 years, it's really grown in popularity. And so Austen is one of a few classic novelists whose work really continues to be read by large numbers of people and read for pleasure. And by that, I mean that there are large segments of readers that are reading these classic authors on their own outside of the context of a classroom and just for fun. And moreover, Jane Austen's works have actually passed into popular culture. So, for example, her novels have been made into films, some of them numerous times, like Pride and Prejudice. And there's all kinds of Austen merchandise if you go on Amazon. Everything from teacups to Jane Austen action figures, even to shower curtains. How many famous classic authors do you know that have inspired shower curtains? And in addition, there's also Austen fan clubs these days. There are collections of readers that get together to talk about Austen's novels and then to even reenact some of their most famous scenes. Of course, those fans don't have all that many scenes to choose from because Austen herself passed away fairly early in life and didn't actually publish as much as other authors. She wrote 6 novels in total. 4 of those novels she published during her own lifetime. And then her brother published 2 of her shorter novels after her death. And one of those 2 novels is Northanger Abbey, which was published in 1818. So let me give you a little bit of background about what's going on within Northanger Abbey. Northanger Abbey details the story of Catherine Morland. Much like Evelina, Catherine Morland is from a very rustic area of the country. She lives far away from the hustle and bustle and fashionable society of London. And like Evelina, she is the teenage daughter of a clergyman. So that means that she's raised in a home where her father earns enough money for the family to be comfortable, but not so much that they're super rich and super fashionable. Now, unlike Evelina, this novel pays a lot of attention to reading. Literally, this novel catalogs the books that Catherine reads, and then also the way that Catherine reads social situations. So, Catherine is a huge fan of Gothic fiction, in particular the fiction of Anne Radcliffe, who was a period author of Gothic fiction. Many of her Gothic fictions are a bit like Poe's in terms of the conventions that they use. And so Catherine's neighbors, the Allens, decide that they're going to take Catherine with them on a holiday to Bath. And we should view this trip as very much like Evelina's trip to London. Because by the late 1700s, Bath had become a fashionable resort town that had a lot of the same cultural attractions as London, but not the crowds. So people went to Bath first to bathe in and drink from the waters of leftover Roman ruins of baths. And then they also went there to see and be seen, to go shopping, to go to the theater, and to go to a series of public assemblies, which are many of the balls that Catherine attends. Now, while in Bath, Catherine meets new friends, including Isabella Thorpe, who is a fellow reader of novels like Catherine, and also Henry Tilney, who becomes her love interest in the story. And first of all, I should also say that the story itself is complicated. You're going to have to keep track of a lot of characters, some of whom seem to have like similar names. And the language of this novel will probably feel old-fashioned and complex, much like Evelina. So please look up any terms that you don't understand. I personally like the Oxford English Dictionary, which you can access online through the library's homepage. And the reason I like that is that it includes definitions over time. We know that language changes over time, so this can give you definitions of words that no longer exist or are no longer used, as well as how some words are used in the 18th century. And there is a difference between what some words mean in the 18th century versus the 21st century. In addition, if you run across things that you don't understand, please ask me. You're welcome to just shoot me an email, or even better yet, ask on the discussion board. So I just taught this novel to a group of senior English majors, and they had a lot of questions about things that Catherine says, that she does, or that she hears. And so I imagine that you might also have questions as well. Now, I mentioned that Northanger Abbey is all about reading. Catherine's knowledge of the world is largely taken from her novel reading, especially her Gothic novel reading. And Catherine is a character that tends to read the world through the filter of the Gothic. And the novel is also written as a parody of two very popular forms of early 19th century fiction. The first is sentimental novels like Evelina. It parodies those sentimental novels. And the second is Gothic novels like The Cask of Amontillado or The Fall of the House of Usher. Northanger Abbey also parodies the Gothic. So let's spend a little bit of time thinking about parody. First and foremost, let's define the term. What is parody? Well, parody is a literary composition that seeks to imitate another piece of literature, another author's style, or another genre. And the purpose of this imitation is comedy. So parody is really mimicry with a twist, and with a comic twist. The means by which parodies usually make fun of the original is through a few different methods. One is the exaggeration of characters, of language, or of situations. Second is the minimization of characters or languages or situations. And third is that they apply the conventional styles of an author or a genre, but they do it to an inappropriate subject matter. Now, we actually encounter a lot of parody in our own culture. And one key place that we encounter parody is in films. So I want to show you two short clips to show you what parody looks like. The first is a clip from a James Bond movie, and the second is a clip from a movie called Spy, which was released in 2015. Spy is a parody of James Bond movies, and it stars Melissa McCarthy as a dowdy CIA analyst who has to reluctantly go in the field to find her partner after he's been captured. And you can see how the parody works in this one scene, which is the gadget reveal scene. And by way of background, James Bond films always have this scene where James Bond is given gadgets to use on his mission. And usually the gadgets are like the most cutting edge and like coolest gadgets you might possibly see. And they're meant to fit James Bond's character as an international man of mystery. So let's take a look at what the gadget reveal looks like in Bond versus what it looks like in the Spy movie. Here's James Bond.
Your new BMW 750. All the usual refinements. Machine guns, rockets, the GPS tracking system.
Welcome. Please fasten seatbelt and obey all instructions for a safe trip.
Thought you'd pay more attention to a female voice.
I think we've met.
I am not interested in your sordid escapades. Let's get on with it, shall we? Your new telephone. Talk here, listen here.
So that's what I've been doing wrong all these years. Look.
Okay, that was James Bond's gadget reveal. He gets what looks like a sports car and also a cell phone. And obviously, this movie came out several years ago. It came out during an era where cell phones looked, in some ways, a lot less cutting edge than they do now. But at the time this movie was released, those were cutting edge phones. All right, here is the spy movie. When Melissa McCarthy's character goes to get her gadgets to go on her mission.
Susan.
Yes.
I was given specific instructions by Elaine to tailor these gadgets to you. These are not yours. This antifungal spray can freeze and disable any security system.
Wow, that is quite an image to be carrying all over Europe.
It's also pepper spray.
Why not just make it look like pepper spray?
It's a pretty good idea. All right, well, next time.
Well, I can wait if you want to print up a new label.
No, I'd have to turn the printer on again. I don't really want to. Each of these are filled with chloroform.
Wow, that is an unsettling amount of hemorrhoid wipes. Makes me kind of wonder what exactly is going on back there.
I wouldn't know. I don't have that problem.
I don't have that problem.
Okay, as you can see, the gadgets that Melissa McCarthy is given are completely inappropriate to what it is that you might expect from a spy film. So we expect that a spy film features a really super cool CIA agent or some type of international spy. We get Melissa McCarthy, who is wearing a sweater. She looks a little bit dowdy. She's pretty reserved, and she's given these really gross and old-fashioned and totally mundane tools that are not cool at all. And you can also register on her face her disappointment because she expects that she's going to be getting super cool gadgets, and yet look what she gets. All right, so that's how parody works in film. What the film is doing is it's exaggerating and using props, like inappropriate props, to make the parody. But what I want us to do is to think about how Austen creates parody in Northanger Abbey. In particular, how she creates characters, situations, and language to parody sentimental works like Evelina. All right, please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you on the discussion board.